first component in my fly line system is called fly line backing. Backing is braided Dacron. Essentially, it's fancy string, but it's important to use a material that's designed for this purpose. Braided Dacron doesn't absorb much water, and it's also very strong per its small diameter. Fly line backing serves two purposes. First of all, it acts as an insurance policy. My fly line is approximately 82 feet. Let's say a fish decided to run further than 82 feet. Well, I've got 100 yards, 200 yards, maybe even 300 yards of backing tied to that fly line and attached to my reel. So it serves as an insurance policy against losing my fly line. Number two, again, my fly line being around 82 feet, if I just put the line on the reel, it would only take up so much space on the reel. If I put backing in there as filler first, it increases the diameter of the arbor, and thus, per revolution of my reel spool, I'm going to bring in more line. Now, backing is available in several different colors. I've got chartreuse here. It's also available in other bright colors as well as white. It's also available in different strengths, 12-pound, 20-pound, 30-pound, sometimes even heavier, with 20-pound being most often used. And most reels are going to take somewhere around the ballpark of 100 yards of backing, with saltwater reels and big game reels taking up to even 300, 400. A fly line is probably the most critical part of my fly fishing system. After all, it's the weight of the line that we're casting, not the fly, not the leader, not anything else, but the line itself. Now, there's a couple of variables when it comes to fly lines that you need to know about also. The first is the color. Fly lines are made in fairly neutral colors and really bright colors. This really boils down to personal preference, but if you're fishing for really spooky fish that might be spooked by a bright line color, you might go to a neutral color. And conversely, if you're having trouble seeing a neutral color, you might go with a bright color to help you with your casting and your visibility. The second variable is the taper of the fly line. A fly line is tapered to permit smooth transfer of energy through this system. In fact, my whole system's tapered. My arm is tapered, my rod is tapered, my line is tapered, and you'll come to find out that the leader is tapered. Now let's take a look at a couple of different fly line tapers. The first type of fly line taper I want you to be aware of is called a weight forward. A weight forward fly line is designated by the letters WF. A weight forward fly line is the most often used today, and it's definitely the one I recommend for you as a beginner. In addition, if you're looking to do any distance casting, say 30 foot or more, a weight forward is definitely the one to have. The rear section of a weight forward fly line, or the section that attaches to the reel or to the backing, is thin .029 running line, usually around 30 to 35 foot or so. Then we move into the rear taper, which is usually fairly short, maybe 5 foot. Then into the belly of the fly line. This is where it gets its weight. That's usually around 30 foot or so. Then into the front taper of the line. Now this taper is what permits the smooth transfer of energy through this line. That front taper is usually around 15 foot or so, although different manufacturers will use different lengths to achieve different results. The next type of taper is called a double taper. A double taper fly line is designated by the letters DT. Now, double taper fly lines are not used as often as they used to be, but they're still available, and a lot of folks really like them. The rear section of a double taper is exactly like the front section. The rear is a taper, usually 15 to 20 foot, maybe even longer. Then you move into the belly, which is in the ballpark of, say, 40 foot, and then another taper, say the front taper here. Now, since the rear taper and the front taper are the same, one advantage of a double taper is when I'm done using that front taper, I can flip it around and use the rear taper. Again, they're both the same. Also, Due to the fact that double tapers usually have a longer front taper, that means they permit a more delicate presentation, a smoother transfer of energy. A lot of folks like to use double tapers for very light duty, delicate fishing, and they're very often used on bamboo fly rods. The next type of fly line taper is called a triangle taper. That's designated by the letters TT. Now the rear section of a triangle taper, or again the end that attaches to the reel or the backing, is usually around 40 foot of our .029, the thin running line. Then we move into the rear taper, which may be in the 10-foot ballpark, and then we have about a 30-foot continuous taper. This means that we've always got thicker line pushing thinner line, thus the triangle taper. Triangle taper, like a double taper, makes for a very nice, light, delicate presentation. Triangle taper is also known as the best roll casting fly line on the market. Last but not least, you may hear somebody refer to a bass bug taper or a big bug taper. Essentially what these are weight forward fly lines with shorter front tapers, which allows you to cast bigger, heavier, more wind resistant flies easier. In addition to different line weights, fly lines also come in different densities. The first type to be aware of is called a floating fly line. Floating fly line, obviously, is designed to float on the surface. Used when we're fishing flies that float on the surface like dry flies or say some bass bugs. But they can also be used for fishing below the surface when used in conjunction with flies that sink or in conjunction with split shot and the like. The next type is called a sinking tip fly line. Now this is a floating line where the front 6 to 10 to maybe even 20 foot are tungsten impregnated to help the front portion of that sink below the surface. This is designed for fishing sinking flies and for fishing in the water column as opposed to on the surface or right on the bottom. Next is an intermediate fly line. An intermediate is lightly weighted throughout its entire length. That's designed to sink slowly for fishing just below the surface or again in the water column. Last but not least is a full sinking fly line. Full sinking lines are heavily weighted throughout their entire length and they're designed for fishing on the bottom. Now these come in different weights. Usually you'll hear it referred to as a class 3 or class 5 and such, with the 3 being the lighter, the 5 being the heavier. Now we know about line weight, we know about fly line taper, and we know about fly line densities. Now, when I walk into a fly shop to pick out the right line, what do I look for? Most fly line packaging will have a series of letters and numbers telling you exactly what it is. Usually, we'll have the taper of the line first, the line weight second, and the density third. Here, we've got a weight forward, 7 weight, sinking tip, designated by an F/S. Down here, we have a double taper, 4 weight, floating fly line. Here we have a weight forward, 8 weight, intermediate, and last but not least, a weight forward, 7 weight, sinking, and it's also telling me that's a class 5 or a fairly heavy sinking fly line.
If you like this video, hit subscribe. It helps out a lot. And check out these videos. We think you might like them too.